Well, today I'm going to make a video on something I've never had to do before. I'm going to say goodbye to my first car. You know, everyone has to come to that point at some point, usually. Very few people are fortunate enough to keep their first car their whole life. Some people wouldn't be fortunate to keep their first car. You know, maybe you had a piece of crap. Whatever. I loved my first car, and this was an amazing car. Many of you in the comments have mentioned how much you loved your experience with one, and I'm glad that we were all able to share that. This car has a special place in my heart because it's been in my life for the better part of my life. I was only, I was about 6 years old when my dad got this car, and I'm 28 years old now. So that's a long time to spend with a car, long time to know it, and a lot of miles to ride in it. Unfortunately, and I can show you guys here in a few minutes, there's just been too much damage to the front end. I could try to save this car, but with the fact that I have another project car and my son has one, it just makes more sense to cut this one up and repair two cars, make two cars out of three instead of trying to cobble this back together, because man, this thing's pretty beat up. So to say goodbye to the car, I'm just going to go through a few stories I remember with it, what makes it significant, you know, the kind of the key moments anyone has with their first car. My dad bought the car in 2004. My grandfather had seen it in the newspaper and showed it to my dad and told him, hey, if you don't go buy this car, I'm going to buy it. So dad went and bought it. It was on the other side of the Mobile Bay. We lived in Mobile at the time. And so it wasn't a big drive, wasn't a big ordeal. I think it had a bad alternator. So dad got that going, got it charging, and I think it wound up being brushes. And so he had that rebuilt by somebody he knew who was rebuilding starters and alternators at the place he worked, or for the place he worked. So he did that, and we went and picked up the car and drove it home, and it ran faithfully with almost no work besides just regular oil changes for about 10 years. And in that 10 years, there was one point where when we moved from Mobile to Jackson, he was driving the car back and forth to Jackson from Mobile all week long. I believe he said it was 600 miles a week he was driving, and he did that for a year during the time we were getting ready to look for a house here and trying to get moved up to Jackson. So this car, it made that possible for him, and it was a simple, economical, reliable way for him to get to work and to get where he needed to go. I remember the day we went to go get my license. My dad worked nights, so my mom was the one that had to take me. She took me up to the DMV, and I did the test in our minivan and passed. And I want to say that was either a Tuesday or we did it, I think it was a mid-afternoon on Wednesday. And I was playing in church at the time, and we had Wednesday night practices. And I remember going up to my mom that night being like, you're gonna let me drive myself, right? I'm gonna drive myself since I have a license now. And she wanted to stop me, but I was so ready and so confident. And she just looked at me with a tear in her eye, and she just said, go ahead, go, you can go. And so I did, and I went out there confidently to the car, this car, and I sat down inside of it, and I fired it up, and all of a sudden I just felt so tiny. Which is funny because the car is so small, but the car felt massive around me. And I'd already driven the car several times. Dad had taught me how to drive it. I knew how to drive stick. I had driven bigger cars than this. The minivan was pretty large. I had driven an S10, a full-size pickup, several other vehicles by this point. And all of a sudden, now that I was on my own, the world, including the car, felt so big. And I just remember that feeling and the exhilarating feeling of operating the car by hand from, you know, a machine that is completely dependent on your hands to operate. No automatic transmission, barely any power brakes, no power steering. It was a real raw experience, like you hear people talk about anytime a Datsun is brought up, anytime a classic car is brought up. It's what almost all auto enthusiasts are seeking, is that moment. And I think that when you, as a young man, get an opportunity to drive something like these, it's like you get an addiction. There's no replacement that an automatic car, not even automatic, but a new modern automated car, even a modern standard transmission has so many. They have automatic rev matching usually, and they have so many of the nannies in place to that really kind of remove that layer of control that you have unless you build one yourself from scratch, which a lot of people do. We had a lot of fun memories with the car, and once the car was in Jackson, it kind of had your normal civilian life. It was a mechanic's car. You know what they say about mechanics cars? They're always the last one to get worked on. But when it's a Datsun, it doesn't really need it. Change the oil, and she's happy to go. So it lived. Probably he drove it 5 days a week, 30 miles a day. There were a few times where it would be parked for a little while because he also had an S10, S15 Sonoma, and we would drive that a lot. A lot of fond memories in that vehicle as well. Unfortunately, that one's now gone, but that's another video, I guess. But anyway, I get the car in 2014 when I turn 16 and get my license. This is the car I learned to drive stick in. This is the car I went on my first date in. Me and my best friend from high school went tens of thousands of miles in this car. We had a little slogan because we were both so used to people stopping us and asking, hey, what year is that thing? Before I could even get anything out of my mouth, my buddy would lean out the window and shout, 81! Because we knew what they were asking. So that became a little inside joke for us, and this became synonymous with my image. And people knew me by the car. People would honk at me going down the road and going down the highway, anywhere in town. People just immediately recognized that I was there, and the car just had so much personality. And no one almost ever said, "Oh, look at that old clunker you're driving." They're like, "Wow, look at that cool old car." Or girls think it's cute. I had 2 accidents in this car. The first one, I was looking at the maps trying to check my directions and starting to stop traffic, and I smacked into someone's trailer hitch, and he came out and got out of his car and looked. He said, "My car's fine. You want to call the cops?" "Not really." So I pulled over into a bank parking lot and looked, and it had caved the front bumper in, but the radiator wasn't busted. Nothing was messed up. So I turned around and went home, tucked my tail. I was actually about to pick up a girl, and I decided to call that off because I didn't want to show up in a hoopty that was all banged up. So I didn't think her dad would take too kindly into me picking her up in a car I had just wrecked. I didn't think that was the best first impression. So we just tucked our tail and went home. But that was a pretty easy fix, and it actually didn't really mess up the car that bad. I drove it for years after that until it had the death nail accident that really damaged the frame rails in the front. This was another incident where someone had slammed on the brakes in front of me, and I was probably following a little too close, if I'm honest, and I had reached into the passenger seat to grab something, and when I looked back up, I was too late to brake. I mean, it all happened just like that. I slammed on the brakes, wheels locked up. I smacked into her and still had a ton of momentum going forward, and I kind of was trying to deflect to the left. I came out across the oncoming lane and then parked on the side of the road. I ended up locking my arms, and I didn't even hit my head on the steering wheel, but it was a pretty bad accident. Unfortunately, the cops did get called for that one, and that one kind of sucked. They really didn't want us to tow the car home with my dad's truck, but we did it anyway. About 10 minutes after we got it home, we had it cranked back up, and it was running, not driving. The radiator had been torn up. The fan had shredded the radiator. As you can see, the core support is crumpled. There was a lot of front end damage. And at this time, I also had a 1997 Toyota Tercel. And it had had some small issue, and that's why I was driving this, but we quickly switched back to that car. And I drove that car for a long time with this just parked, fully assembled, but in about this state. And I had a bad accident in it, and this time it wasn't my fault. I was driving down a highway and someone turned in front of me when they didn't have the right of way. I had a green light, and that was that. That was the end of that car. Ruined the front end, and anyway, so when that happened, I had no transportation. I had to get to work, and so I dragged this thing out of the weeds. I had a Mustang radiator from a first generation Mustang, like crammed in there. It was too tall to put the hood back on, but the hood was messed up anyway. So I crammed that Mustang radiator in there, made some custom hoses that would link it all together, filled it with water, put a battery in it, and zip tied some headlights in. And this thing got me back and forth to work for months until I was able to get into another vehicle. That wound up being the best purchase I ever made. I purchased a white Chrysler Town & Country Limited with all the bells and whistles for $275. I put 20,000 miles on it, barely fixed anything. We had to fix water in the transmission, a bad coil pack, and a bad crank position sensor, and then a water pump halfway through owning it. And when I sold it, I had to repair the melted injector harness. That's freaked out. All in all, I drove the crap out of that van. It was an excellent van, and then I wound up making money on it because I sold it for $1,000. All that said, a Datsun will get you through, man. You can't kill these cars. You just can't kill them. And I can't think of a better first car for anyone to have. And that's why I'm excited to give my son a Datsun 210 for his first car. I want to try to end the video by tying this all together with the idea that with the way my last video went, it went over a lot better than I thought. I thought people were going to take me as whiny or complaining, and that's not really the way I wanted to be perceived. So I'm really glad that everyone understood. So hopefully you get what I'm about to say here, which is I had an older gentleman in my life who spoke a lot of wisdom in my life. And he told me this idea that we live in 3.5 dimensions. The 3 dimensions being your physical space that you can move around in. You know, we can walk around and jump and all of that. But the half dimension is time. You can only move forward in time. You can't go back. If you mess something up, it's just messed up. You know, there's no second chances. You can redo it, you can fix it, but what's done is done. And that's very important to remember. When you wreck a car, you can't unwreck it. It's permanent. And the feeling that I got when, the final time I wrecked this car, and I knew in my gut that was it. That was the end of the car. Man, it was an awful feeling. But that's life, and life just keeps rolling. And you can sit here and have yourself a pity party, or you can decide, hey, we can make the best of what we have. We can take it and save it and keep it for the future, and hopefully our kids will be able to have the tools and the resources that they need to be able to recover and fix all these problems. I don't want to get too political. I don't want to pick any political sides, but I think we can all agree that the state of our country right now is not great. It's hard to even get along with your neighbor these days, and so I want to make these videos to encourage us all to sit down, slow down, spend time with each other, and think about what matters in our lives. Let's not be hasty to speak. Let's not be hasty to do things or to throw things out, throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Let's take time to appreciate what we have and to be good stewards of the things we're blessed with, and provide our children and the next generation with the resources they need to combat this corrupt corporate landscape that we have set up for them. So thanks for watching, and I hope that this video feels a little bit more positive, even though it's about saying goodbye to a car. It has a really optimistic future, and I'm glad that this car won't ever see the Crusher. So thanks for watching.